Multiple 2020 candidates are facing questions about past positions. So how important is it to remain authentic and principled? Can you change those things? Let's ask a former presidential candidate himself and former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee. Great to have you with us tonight.
Well, thanks for having me on, Shannon. And I do think they're going to have some problems because when you make these big changes as they're making, Kamala Harris is going to be able to, I think, answer the fact that she was the attorney general. She had a job to do. She had to defend the laws. But where she's going to have problems is the radical position she's taken, for example, against the Knights of Columbus, where she thinks it's an all men's organization and it's, discriminatory. I think she's going to have to come out and also be against an all-female organization that's responsible for increased obesity in the U.S. I'm talking about the Girl Scouts. Because if you're going to be able to take on the Knights of Columbus because they're all male, then you can't have all female organizations. And if you're going to blame the Knights of Columbus because they're pro-life, then how are you not going to blame any organization for doing what it fundamentally is committed to doing? Now, Gillibrand, on the other hand, I think she's got a big problem because hers weren't job-related. She's a political opportunist. She was for Hillary and Bill Clinton before she was against them when it was no longer in her political interest. And what she's going to find is when you mess with the Clintons, they mess with you back. Watch and see.
Yeah, you're from Arkansas. You would know.
I know about
how that
yes,
works.
I do.
I want to play a little bit of a position with Kirsten Gillibrand. This is her on 60 Minutes talking about, she used to have a 100 A+ rating from the NRA. She now has an F because she's clearly changed her position. She was asked about that.
After I got appointed, I went down to Brooklyn to meet with families who had suffered from gun violence in their communities. And you immediately experience the feeling that I couldn't have been more wrong. I only had the lens of upstate New York.
But you had lived in New York City for a decade.
And that's why I was embarrassed.
What do you make of that, Governor?
As phony as a $4 bill. I mean, the fact is she had lived in Brooklyn for 10 years, as the interviewer pointed out. And she was pro-Second Amendment when she was in an area that supported it. And then when it no longer was in her political interest, she was willing to switch. Switch hitters are great in baseball and sometimes can be a real asset to the team. But what we're seeing among the Democrats is they're all running as far to the left as they can, and that may be necessary for them in their primary. But they're going to run so far left of the American public, it's going to be real hard for them to be, I think, sellable to the American public when it comes to the general election.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a very crowded field, so they do have to distinguish themselves. And because so many of these things that are catching fire in the Democratic Party are things like bragging about being a socialist and those kinds of things, do they elect someone, do you hope they choose someone as their nominee who is too far for the American public when it comes to the general?
Well, as a Republican, I hope they pick someone who is just so out there that they're unelectable. But I think there's a good chance that what will happen is that the vast majority of the candidates will all run really far to the left, and there might be somebody who is a more common sense and what I would call a traditional Democrat. And there are many of them that they're really not out there on the left. They're very moderate and thoughtful, and they have positions that may be different than mine. That kind of person might end up getting the nomination because that person gets all of the moderate votes, and then the really left of center votes split a dozen different ways.
Well, we'll see. It's going to be a crowded debate stage, I have a feeling, for the first few months. Governor, thank you. Great to have you weighing in.
Thanks, Shannon. Great to be here.